Welcome back to part 3 of our interview with Amanda Morin. I'm your host, Shantae, and today we're talking about after the IEP meeting. How can you stay on top of your child's IEP and their goals? What if you don't think your child's IEP is being followed? Should your child attend the meeting? If your child is part of the special education system, you know that at some point during the year you're going to have to attend an IEP meeting on behalf of your child. Why then is it that every year so many of us feel overwhelmed when the time approaches, and we react versus being proactive? I know I wanted help, and I'm hoping that by reaching out to Amanda Morin, the information will be valuable to all of you. Amanda is the author of the Everything Parents Guide to Special Education, and she's also the in-house expert for Understood.org and a former early childhood educator and parent advocate. I love the way Amanda gets it. She is also a special needs mom, and she provides a clear understanding and breaks down information for the rest of us. In case you missed part 1 of our interview with Amanda, you may want to go back and have a listen. Her and I discussed a lot of important information about how parents can prepare for an IEP meeting. And what does being prepared for an IEP meeting look like? Amanda also shares tips on ways to organize your child's IEP binder. We could all use help with that one. In part 2 of my conversation with Amanda, we were talking about actually attending the IEP meeting and what types of questions we need to be asking. And today we're talking about after the IEP meeting. So let's get started. After the meeting, how can you stay on top of your child's IEP? And the second part of that is like how involved should you be?
So I think in terms of staying on top of your child's IEP, there are multiple ways you can do that. I mean, there are informal ways to do that, checking in with your child. How did it go today? Did you meet with the speech therapist by any chance? Just sort of checking in and seeing what's going on with them. Keeping a dialogue open with your child is a great way to know how things are going. Mm-hmm. And especially if you notice that they're not quite themselves, or they're showing more frustration, or the work coming home isn't as easily handled as it used to be. I think that's one way. I also am a real big proponent of just checking in from time to time. And I think it's important to ask, who's the best person to check in with? Is that the case manager? Is it the teacher? And to say what's the best way to check in. I don't think it's necessarily a matter of asking whether you can check in. I think it's a matter of asking what the best way to do that is. Right. Basically saying, I'm going to check in with you, whether it's biweekly, weekly, every month or something like that. Mm-hmm. Is it better to do that with a scheduled phone call? Is it better to email you? Mm-hmm. How do you prefer for me to do that? And it's because an IEP is a fluid document. If things aren't working well, it's better to know sooner rather than later. But I would also put a caveat there that it's important to give things time to work as well. So if you put a new program in place and you don't see an improvement within a week or two, you probably want to give another couple of weeks before you speak up and say, I don't think this is doing what it needs to.
Right. I think that's an important point because people respond differently, or how they like to respond is different. Like my daughter had a male teacher one time, and he preferred to call you, or he thought that he was catching up with you at the bus. He'd prefer to talk that way. And that's fine. But now I have another teacher where she doesn't mind if you text or, email. Right. So they all have their own style, which is fine. You just have to know, which one. And I know I've ran into grandparents before where they're like, teacher doesn't get back to me. But, maybe the email is incorrect. There's other things that you have to kind of look, right. And some people are not as fast on email right. and getting back, So, yes, we want them to be, but.
Right. And I think, for me, I always have to remind myself that my child is one of probably 30 students in a classroom. When I was a teacher, I remember trying to find time to use the bathroom during the day was hard enough, let alone check my email. So I always try and temper my, oh no, somebody didn't get back to me with, okay, wait a minute. It's only been 5 minutes since school ended. Maybe we're just sort of, and I think conferences are always a good time to have those check-ins too. You have parent-teacher conferences often scheduled, I think, twice a year. Right. And I very frequently will ask if the specialists can attend those conferences as well. And so it's sort of like a mini IEP convening, but it's not necessarily an IEP meeting. It's just a sort of another check-in. Because I think sharing information amongst team members is really key too. And that's something as a parent you can foster, whether it's adding a couple of extra people to your email chain so everybody knows what's going on,
Right.
or whether it's having that meeting where you say, oh, I'd love for the occupational therapist to jump in on this because this might be something she can help you with in the classroom. Right.
That's a good point.
In terms of sort of keeping on top of it, I think that we often assume once an IEP is written, you can just sort of breathe easy. But I don't actually think that happens in actuality, because there are so many kids in a classroom who have IEPs or even 504 plans or accommodations, and teachers are really juggling a lot.
Right.
And so I think it's really important, especially at the beginning of a school year, or when your child switches, if you have a child who has semester classes and switches to having another class,
Right.
to check in with a new teacher and to say, have you had a chance to look over my child's IEP? Do you have questions about it?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything I can provide you information about? Can I give you the name of another teacher who's worked well with my child and see what works? And I think those are really sort of non-confrontational ways of making sure they have the information they need.
Those are great tips. What if you think that an IEP is not working? Like, what if you think what would you do, and how would you take action on that?
Sure. So I think there are two ways an IEP can not be working. The first is that the program's not appropriate and it's just not helping your child make progress. And I think the other way is that an IEP cannot be working when it's not being followed appropriately. And in both cases, the first thing I would do is speak to the teacher that who is putting that program into place, or you suspect may not be putting that program into place, and talk about what challenges they might be seeing in the classroom, or if they're seeing challenges in the classroom, or if there's something going on that you may not be aware of, just to sit down and say, I feel like this may not be going as well as it could be. Let's talk about that. And then the next step, I think, is to call an IEP meeting and have the whole team sit down. Excuse me, the reason I suggest talking to the teacher first is because when you sit down as a team, you want to have the data that supports what you're saying. So, if, for example, your child has not made progress towards a goal using a certain program, that data is being collected, and then you want to make sure that the teacher has the data to bring to the meeting to back up that it's not working well.
Okay. Or if it hasn't been implemented,
Right. Or that it hasn't been implemented, there won't be data. Right. So that's important too.
Coincidental or not, but yesterday my daughter comes walking home and she brings me in her envelope, addressed to the parents of, my daughter, and scheduled the meeting. So I'm like, and part of me was like, oh God, and then again I was like, I'm talking to Amanda tomorrow. Yay! Okay, Amanda, I'm going to put you on the spot. So I got the paperwork yesterday. As I had mentioned before, I do have a binder, but I swear I still always feel like I'm not as organized as I should be. And so anyways, now there's two parts to this. My daughter, so the IEP, they want the end of this month. I know I need to kind of call and ask people, who I want to attend and let the school know and agree to it. I need to review everything. And perhaps, I'm going to let you tell me some things you think I should do. But then I also wanted to mention to you that this is also, she's going to be 21 in February. So I've only got a year left. Yeah. Okay. So that might be too much for this conversation, but maybe there's a few little tips if you know of something you can recommend, or anyways. And we have started the transition process, so I want you to kind of know that part, but it just kind of is giving me a little bit of a heart palpitation.
So the first thing, you're right about calling your people, getting your people organized. But I think start with your prior written notice that came home and make sure you can see what the purpose of the meeting is, what was checked off. You want to make sure who's listed on the invite is everybody you would want from the school to be there as well. Okay. If there's transition planning in place, is there somebody from, say, vocational rehab invited so that they can help with that transition component? Right. And then I think making sure that everybody, I think the other thing, of course, is to make sure that you can attend the meeting. I think that's
need it on that day.
Right. And I think that's important. I forget to mention that a lot, but it has to be a mutually convenient time. So if it's not, it's okay to make that phone call and say, I really can't make this meeting. What else do you have available? What can we fit to make work? And I think a lot of parents don't understand that they don't have to that if they can't make it, it's okay to ask.
I think that's a very important point, because there's many years when she was younger I didn't know that I could do that. So
Me too. And I've had heart palpitations about that myself. Like, oh, I can't make this meeting. What are we going to do? Does your daughter attend meetings too?
she has. I think the last couple of ones we've had her more involved. I mean, I wish I would have had her more involved all along, because that's something I wish I would have done. But yes, the last couple ones. But again, not necessarily the whole time.
Sure.
Still, because although she probably could now, but she gets kind of bored.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, she's 21, almost 21. I'm sure she does. But I think the other thing I would do is ask her, what does she want people to know? Mm. Does she want you to tell them, or does she want to share that with them? So I think that's...
I have a drama queen, so she'll want to be center stage. She'll be sharing and sharing and sharing. So,
do you know, there's actually, I think somewhere on understood.org, I wrote a self-advocacy worksheet that she could do, and then you can limit it because it's on the worksheet.
Okay, good. Then I'll look that up. So it's that you might have to send me some links afterwards.
Yeah, and I think so the purpose of the meeting, making sure you have everybody you would expect and want at that meeting, that you can make the meeting, that you know what you want to accomplish, and then it matches what the team is saying is to be accomplished that day, which would be the purpose of the meeting. Any questions that you have, no matter how off the wall they may seem, it's worth having them written down ahead of time. And a lot of times I'll have all of my questions written down, and they'll be addressed before I even ask them. I'll check it off and be like, okay, so I don't have to ask this question, but it's been addressed, right? So I think making sure you have your questions ahead of time and your commentary, things that you want the team to know, things you're worried about, your parent report, she's getting close to the end of her school career, and that's so scary. And there are things you want the team to know about that, about, your worries and your fears and your hopes and those kinds of things. And that's so important. So I think having that, and then of course, just going back through and making sure you have the most recent paperwork on hand. Right. Her most recent IEP, any evaluations that have been done, any progress reports that have come home, any work samples that you think are important to show what you want to discuss. So anything that's come home that you think really makes a point, and shows whether it means that you should adjust a goal, or whether it means the goal is working, those kinds of things. Is that helpful?
No, that's helpful.
That's great.
Yeah, so I could feel better. And I was going to ask you too, just because I don't know this answer, and I know it's been brought up before. But now, last time we did her meeting, I didn't schedule, there's certain evaluations I should have probably requested, right? There's certain things towards the end of her schooling that they should, every 3 years they do an evaluation or something like that we should ask. And I know someone had mentioned to me before, an advocate had mentioned, you should get all of her evaluations redone before she leaves school. So can you address that?
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, because that's in part some of the legislation that we talked about. There's something called the RISE Act that's coming that will hopefully make it so you don't have to have all those reevaluations done before you go on to the next. But I think right now we're at the point where if your child is going into a program, whether it's college, community college, some other kind of program, community programming, right, after school, after high school, right, so a post-secondary program where that evaluation will be needed to, I hate to use this phrase, is the best one I can think of, to prove her need for services, right? So that will establish a diagnosis, that will establish sort of the needs and deficits. I think it's important to have that done before she leaves school, to have it in hand. And it's okay to just say, I want to make sure I have the most updated information, right, that shows all the progress she's made and all the progress she needs to continue to make. So can we talk about what evaluations need to be done to make sure we have that?
Okay, perfect. I'm going to use it. So thank you. Well, Amanda, this has been wonderful. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you sharing everything. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to spend with us and educate, and all the work that you do in the special needs community. I thank you, because I do see all the wonderful work that you're out there doing. And there's books that you have, Everything Special Education. Am I saying, is that the title?
The Everything Parents Guide to Special Education. Yeah, yes, is one of them.
Yes, and then you have others like Fun Things to Do. But the special education, we'll put all those links in there as well. And did you have any other questions for me before we wrap up? Not for me, but
No, it's such a pleasure to do this with you. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. I think what you're doing is so wonderful too. I mean, you're meeting a need, and I told you the other day that your email, you had a special issue of behavior management that came into my inbox exactly when I needed it. So thank you for everything you're doing too.
I'm so glad. I'm sure Mimi will be glad too. But thank you. And from the bottom of my heart, I really respect you, and I really like you, and I'm super glad that you have written for us in the past, and that you were willing to come and do an interview, because like I said, I love the way that you write and you make it clear and to the point, and so that we can take action on it. I think that's important, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Talk to you. Thank you. Take care.
This week, please take action on one of the tips Amanda suggests. Find out the best way to communicate with your child's teacher or teachers if you're not sure. Check in with the new teachers and see if they've had a chance to look over your child's IEP. And if you haven't had a chance to watch Amanda's tips on how to organize your child's IEP binder, it's definitely worth watching. Download our pre-IEP worksheet to help guide you as you prepare for your child's next IEP meeting. Print it out and start. I can't thank Amanda enough for sharing so much important information with us over the past 3 interviews. She's provided some great questions we should all be asking in our child's IEP meetings, and I hope that you all find this information as valuable as I have. And I mentioned before, Amanda and I originally spoke for about an hour, but there was so much important information I felt it would be better for us to be able to take action on it if we broke it up into 3 parts. But leave me a comment and let me know if you would have rather heard it all at once, or if you appreciated the breaking it down. I hope that knowing some of this information will help us be able to alleviate some of our feelings of overwhelm when the next IEP meeting approaches. I'll see you here again next week. Bye for now.